It was already 2 years into the Massachusetts school busing desegregation program, a scheme that forced students into schools far away from their homes in an effort to diversify schools, and the protests were still raging. Stanley Forman reported to work early on April 5, 1976 at the Boston Herald-American when another demonstration was going on down at the Boston City Hall. It seemed like there was a protest every single day at this point. He asked his editor Alvin Saley if he could also go down to the City Hall to cover it. Since it was so busy down there, he agreed and set Forman out to report on the event. It was on a Monday, so a lot of students were out missing classes to demonstrate and cause a scene. The city had been busing kids outside of their neighborhoods to desegregate schools, and there were many people against this decision, wanting a return to the old way of doing things. The Racial Imbalance Act of 1965 made it illegal to segregate schools. This law, the first of its kind in the U.S., stated that racial imbalance shall be deemed to exist when the percent of non-white students in any school is in excess of 50% of the total number of students in such school. For September 1974 through the fall of 1976, at least 40 riots occurred in the city. There were interracial stabbings at schools, fights breaking out at beaches, people throwing stones at buses. But it was on that Monday in 1976 when Stanley Forman decided to cover a story already being handled that he was able to capture one of the most iconic images that would still be used to prop up the tensions of racial divide today. The image, now known as the Soiling of Old Glory, shows a white teenager assaulting a black lawyer with a pole bearing the American flag. The lawyer's name was Ted Landsmark, and he was a civil rights activist on his way to a meeting at the courthouse. He was 29 years old at the time and was active in trying to get more minority contractors in the construction industry, but at the time wasn't really paying attention to the busing protests downtown. Landsmark remembered he had been having a difficult time finding a parking spot and was running late for his meeting. When he rounded a corner, he came into contact with the young demonstrators in the opposite direction. The youth with the flag and pole was Joseph Rakes, and by the time Landsmark saw him, he was already waving the flagpole around. A few things about the photo are a little deceptive. It looks as if Rakes was trying to spear Landsmark while he was being held down by someone else. Actually, Rakes was swinging the pole, trying to swat at Landsmark, who had already been knocked to the ground. Having been hit from behind, Landsmark's glasses went flying and he ended up breaking his nose. As a person tried to help him up, that's when the photo was taken. The whole thing happened in about 7 seconds. The man trying to help Landsmark to his feet was identified as Jim Kelly and even stepped in front of the lawyer to try and protect him. Forman watched the whole incident through his camera lens. He left the plaza to follow the protesters and Landsmark went to the hospital. While at the hospital, he happened upon a black doctor who was on duty. He bandaged Landsmark up and pointed out that there were a few reporters waiting to talk to him outside the emergency room. He gave Landsmark a choice of how to deal with his broken nose. He could have a small bandage on it, or he could have his whole face wrapped in such a way to appear that he was a victim of some major violent attack. It's a similar tactic still used today to embellish racial violence and to play on the uninformed public's emotions. Landsmark opted to have the full face bandage and left to face the media. When Forman called his office, they informed him that the story of the fight was already out on the wire. He told the editors that he knew about the fight and he had the pictures to prove it. They rushed him in to develop his shots and had a big decision to make on where to put the story. Howard Hughes had just died, so that became the top story above the fold. However, at the bottom of the front page was the story featuring the soon-to-be Pulitzer Prize winning photo of the Flagstaff incident. The following day, Rakes was on a subway car in the late afternoon. He looked across from him and saw a man holding a paper. Right on the front page was his image, appearing as though he were about to run a man through with a flagpole. He skipped work and went home to his parents saying, "I think I have a problem." Rakes would end up being convicted of assault with a deadly weapon and sentenced to 2 years imprisonment and 2 years of probation. The jail sentence was suspended. In 1983, a police warrant would be issued for his arrest, alleging he'd beaten to death the brother of his girlfriend. However, the charges were dropped in 1988. He would eventually get his life together, getting married and having a family while working as a construction worker and then eventually in hazardous waste. Raikes said to his motivations that day that he was upset he was going to be forced to go to a different school and lose half his friends. Landsmark says he never thinks about Raikes too much, but is more upset with the adults that encourage young people to be out of school and work to participate in the kinds of demonstrations that lead to high levels of violence. In the end, Landsmark said, "I view myself as an American who has benefited tremendously from the best America can provide. And I also recognize that in the name of the flag, some very heinous things have been done to people in this country and elsewhere," he says. "When there's a demonstration that involves the flag that speaks to how we express our values of democracy and fairness, that it is really an appropriate icon for all of us to look to as to what we want to be as opposed to what we sometimes have been." The demonstrations that are going on at this moment speak, I think, to what it is we aspire to be as a democracy that provides fairness and equal opportunity and equality to all of the people that believe in the best values of the flag.